Now, we've gone through the basics about a class. Hopefully you understand at least the concept of a class. It gives us the ability to organize our functions and variables and that kind of stuff. In this video, I'm going to try to go over a little bit more detail as to how we actually organize the class and then how we call the functions from, once we create our instance. So we're going to create a really quick class here. So we're just going to create a class, and we're going to call it AB, and we're going to have an instance variable that is an int, and we'll call it I, and we'll have another instance variable as another integer, and we'll call it J. And then we'll have a function here called AC, and we'll pass it in an integer, and then we'll have it make some changes to it, and then we'll have one more function here called AD, and we'll do its thing. Okay, so there is our instance of our class. Or I'm sorry, that is our class. This is our blueprint of our class. So just to be specific here, this is our blueprint. Okay, so now we've got this, we've got some instance variables in here. Let's say that I want this to be private, and I want this here to be private. And depending on the language that you're working with, you may or may not have the ability to actually set things to private or not. But it just at this point, I'm not trying to be specific about any particular language. So at this point, we've defined our class. We have everything in it that we need in it. And obviously, if we're doing a class, it's probably going to be much bigger than this. But now we want to actually create an instance of the class. So over here, we actually go and we're opening up a whole new file. So we've got our class defined over here in this particular source code file. And I mean, and this is not necessary. You can do the class and the definition all in one. Generally, you don't, but you can. So inside of here, we'll just say that this is class.c++, just to do something. And then over here, we're going to say this is our worker file that we're going to do. Okay, so inside of here is where we're actually writing our source code. So the first thing that we would do is we would tell it to include this file over here. So we want to make sure that we can get access to this file, class.css, inside of this file. So we include the class file. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create an instance of AB. So we're going to come in and we're going to say something like AB, and we're going to call it class 1, whatever the heck we want to call it. This is our variable name. This is the type. And we're just going to go ahead and set it to a new class. So we're basically telling it that we want to create a new instance of the class. And then we're going to actually call, the first thing to note is I want to set J equal to something. So now this is the name of the class. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually go in here and we're going to say class, because class 1 is the name of our class, dot, and this also depends on the programming language, but most programming languages use a dot in between the class name. This is the instance name. So again, here we have instance. So this is the instance, and then this is, again, our blueprint. And I can't drive this home enough because this is something that people have a really hard time getting in their head. So this is the instance of our class, and we're going to tell it that we want to work with I. Well, the problem is that if we tried to do I, we're going to actually get a compiler error or an error at some point saying that it doesn't know what I is, because I has been designated as being private over here, and therefore the instance of the class doesn't know anything about the variable I. But we can come in and set J equal to 2. The other thing is we declared AC as private, which means that if we were to come over here and say that we wanted to call class1.ac, we're going to get another error because the system's going to say it doesn't know anything about any function named AC. We've basically hidden it from the instance of that variable, of that class. But we can call AD. So we come in here and we can call the AD function, and do whatever the AD function does. And let's say that over here in the AD function, we have code that actually calls AC and passes it in whatever the value of J is. So the point here that I'm trying to make is these classes allow me to set up the different functions and variables that we're going to work with, designate what we want to hide, what we don't. We can have accessor methods that let us go in and actually get to this value through a function instead of actually being able to modify it itself. A good example would be a Social Security number. I don't want you to be able to go in and set the Social Security number to Bob. I want to have some checking in there to make sure that it's numbers and dashes and that it's in the right format. So I could actually have a function that sets that variable, and you have to call the function to set and get that particular variable. Some languages actually force, Objective-C is a good example, it actually forces that type of action to be able to work with the variables. So, and then once we have our instance of our variables, we can then call the functions, not like we would normally do just by calling the function. We have to call it through the instance of that particular variable that we had created. So when we created this class 1 variable up here, this actually defined our variable called class 1, and then we get to all of the things that class 1 can do by referring to it through that instance.